Well, thank you very much for staying with us on the AM show. Time now for us to get into our big stories. The first one we're getting into, and we're going to be talking about the Jubilee House, which has taken on Professor Frimpong Boateng, former minister with this administration. And it's all about that report he put together and what it has generated in recent times, the conversation it has generated, the angst it has generated from some quarters. But what are the main details? We already started the conversation from the newspaper review, or the news review, I should say. We didn't have papers today. Well, now we're joined by Professor Appiagyei Atua. He is a lecturer at the Faculty of Law, University of Ghana. He joins us for a conversation. We'll have another crucial guest joining the conversation shortly via Zoom. But Prof, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining the conversation.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
It's always good having you. And I should add, happy holiday to you.
Same to you.
Let's get into the main, thrust of the matter. What do you make of this report that for some 2 years did not see the light of day? Some have said, well, if he had any real grievances, he should have put that before cabinet when he was a minister. But others have said this report, which was presented to the chief of staff, was swept under the carpet. What is your sentiment on that?
Yes, for me, I think the matter was swept under the carpet. Because if you look at the reports, it is not just an ordinary report. It's not just an informal discussion as it is being alleged. Of course, we don't have all the complement of facts to come to a definite conclusion. But if you put the pieces together, the evidence can be corroborated to come to the conclusion that this is not just a personal rantings by the former minister about an issue that he confronted while doing his work as a minister and as part of the chair of that committee that was set up. So it is unfortunate that is the spin that the government is putting on it. But it is obvious for well-meaning people to discern and to see that this is a deliberate attempt to sweep something under the carpet and to come up with some justification which does not seem to fly.
To come up with some justification that does not seem to fly. But what do you feel could have led to this situation? Why do you think, you say it was swept under the carpet, but why do you think that was?
Well, for a number of reasons. I think one is the obvious fact that who is running the show, the governance system that we have, who is running it, it's not just the government that has been brought to power. And so in this situation, you have some forces that work behind or are working behind the government. And it's not only peculiar to Ghana. It's as a result of the kind of democratic system that has been imposed on us. And so we have a system where people support campaigning and people need to be paid back for what they have put into the campaign exercise. And so for that matter, it's difficult for government to, expose such people. And for that matter, it creates a situation where some issues are swept under the carpet just to protect people who are in high places and who are involved in such practices. I think that is the bottom line.
Do you concur? Do you agree with those who say there were other routes if he wanted this to actually get to Mr. President? He could have done so at a cabinet meeting, for example, or he could have put it before cabinet. Do you feel that would have been prudent? Because others have also said that, look, if he had done that, especially when you're naming people who are members of cabinet, that could have been problematic. How do you respond to that?
I think indirectly,
well, we have connectivity issues with Professor Appiagyei. We'll try to rectify that and, of course, get back to him on that substantive question. But if you just joined the conversation, it's our first big story this morning. And we're talking about the back and forth between Professor Frimpong Boateng and establishment, government, and some responses as well. We'll get to those responses from the likes of Kojo Nkrumah, from the likes of Gabi Otredako, and the counter response from Professor Frimpong Boateng. But we're getting into that 30-plus page report that he put together, which the Jubilee House has described as merely being basically hearsay. They say they are effusions, if you like, emotional effusions of the former Minister of State. And we're getting into that all-important matter. In fact, quoting what the Jubilee House says, it refers to it as containing a catalogue of grievances, personal grievances, if you like, and hearsay. That is how, or that is the posturing of the president on the matter. So an investigation was called for, but then again, you would have people talk about the fact that the Jubilee House then started castigating other elements within the Jubilee House, or the setup started castigating Professor Frimpong Boateng for these utterances. The question remains, where do we go from here? We'll try to see if we're not getting Professor Appiagyei, maybe we'll put some of the statements on and proceed from there. Do we have Prof back on the line? Right, so as we wait to connect with Professor Appiagyei, we'll take some of what Gabi Otredako has been saying on this matter as he was pointed at in this report by Professor Frimpong Boateng. Let's watch what he had to say.
Professional to drop a name on a matter that was purely about a lawyer asking questions about his client. My lawyer comes to me and says that his client, with all these permits and licenses, goes on site with equipment to do prospecting, and the soldiers have come to seize the equipment. Now, what do you do as a lawyer? So I call the minister for clarification. I have a client who has all the documents or permits and licenses required to do prospecting, everything. And he goes on site, and then soldiers come to basically stop, not just stop them from working, but seize all the equipment. So I asked the minister, but they have permits, so what really, I want to understand the issue. And then the minister fires back and says, they are not prospecting, they are mining. Are you challenging the permit as fake? I said, no, but it shouldn't have been issued. I said, yeah, but that's a different matter. But I just want to understand really what the issues are. Is it that, so essentially he gave me his side of the story, which is that he believes that what they were doing was mining, not prospecting, even though they had just gone on site. And that was the conversation that we had.
All right, so having heard Gabi Otredako, let's also respond, or let's listen to someone else who's also been responding to the assertions by Professor Frimpong Boateng. Lord Comey of the MPP has been responding as well.
And granted that he wrote that, whether he's in his right frame of mind. Because this is a minister that I have never spoken to him before in my life. You heard it. I have been national organizer of this party for years, okay? When I knew him, all through to becoming a minister of state and thereafter. Never, ever have I spoken to him in my life. So I don't know what he's talking about. In any case, which of them is he tagging me with? That I'm the frontal person, or I am the influencer or interfering person, or that I am the main person? It's ridiculous, okay? And in fact, he should not play on the minds of Ghanaians. This is a whole professor, okay, highly respected in the Ghanaian society. That the president gives you a tax, okay, and a huge tax as one. What did I hear you read? That he was trying to accuse the president of total disregard? For goodness sake. Well, was he the one who advised the president to set up an interministerial committee in the first place? For him to now call it total disregard. The man who sets the committee up If he were not serious and didn't mean it, he would have set it up and appointed you. The president had some serious confidence in you. That is why he put you there. You failed. And instead of bowing down your heads in shame and accepting the responsibility, you try to throw names around. I am not part of the names that he's going to. I have been director of operations since 2017. Okay, when the president set this committee up. Okay, the president in his own wisdom thought that he wouldn't want to add his director of operations to this committee. And so be it. Never ever. Okay? And I repeat it, never ever. In any case, I heard about some 2-3 weeks ago that he was throwing some wild accusations around, and the president had asked the CID headquarters to investigate that. Okay, so he should go there and face it. And then if he has the balls to mention my name, I would meet him there. Okay, he has to prove beyond reasonable doubts. I am not the type that people can just run around throwing my name around and get away with it. Especially so far as that his terms of reference of managing this whole very important operation is concerned. I am not part of it. I couldn't have been part of it, and he should come again.
Well, we'll get to that list of NPP bigwigs who are pointed to by the former minister. But we have Professor Appiagyei back on the line via phone now. Prof, thank you so much for doing us the honors, the courtesy. You were talking about addressing the matter through cabinet and what you felt about it right before the connection failed us.
Yes, thank you very much for reconnecting me. I think that, as I was saying, the cabinet, one way or the other, ought to have known about the report of the interministerial committee. And you cannot set up a committee, expect the committee to work, and you don't have any inkling of the happenings of the committee. And the only time you have a report of it is when the professor is alleged to have had a conversation with the chief of staff to talk about his wranglings and his informal discussions with the chief of staff. I think that is hitting below the belt. I think the government should not insult the intelligence of Ghanaians. You can put 2 and 2 together and easily infer that cabinet knew about this. It may not have been formal, but cabinet knew about this. It may not have been formal, but JoyNews, other networks have reported about this. If you go on YouTube, you find the information there. If you go on Facebook, it is there. If you go on various WhatsApp platforms, the information is there. So what the Professor Frimpong is saying is not something new that we don't know. So it is therefore a serious government. And it's also part of the mandate of the Minister of Information that he gleans through the newspapers and online portals and so to know the major happenings in the country and report that to cabinet. So, and I think that's exactly what the Minister of Information was also saying. So, cabinet knows about it, and therefore it doesn't lie in the mouth of whoever wrote that piece, trying to rubbish what the former minister has said. It is simply disingenuous on the part of the government to do that. And I think Ghanaians deserve better. We need to know what is happening, and if it was to be in some other country, heads would have rolled by now. There is no way the former minister, will only be sidelined for everything that he wrote, that these are all falsehoods or hearsays and so on. So we should come again. Government should come again. Government should come again and accept some responsibility. Otherwise, we don't see how we can run a country and deal with this Galamsey canker, which is affecting everybody in the country, in the environmental sense, in the area of human rights, in the area of the impact on the economy. People have been dislocated, some have been relocated. So many social vices being committed, social values themselves being degraded. And so we need to really speak to the issues in a more serious manner than the kind of feedback we are getting from the government.
Now, when you look at this game supposedly being played, the statement emerges, the report emerges, then there's a lot of talk about it from civil society to the media to the ordinary Ghanaian on social media. And then there is a call for an investigation. But while that is going on, even before we hear that supposedly this is all frivolous per the Jubilee House, that it is all hearsay, we have some castigation from the powers that be in different quarters. What does that say to you? How does it speak volumes about the purported fight against Galamsey from where you sit, Prof?
Well, I think various organizations and individuals working on the Galamsey issue have come out to say clearly that the government is not being serious about the Galamsey fight. And we cannot deny that fact, except the government that is saying that it is doing the best it can, and the government, the president has an unassailable, is making unassailable efforts to deal with the Galamsey canker. But the results speak for itself. We have to look at the results. What has been achieved? So much money has been pumped into this exercise. The different soldiers, groups and bodies have been sent into this Galamsey zone. Some senior officers as well, and some have even lost their lives as a result of this. The Galamsey fight is not working. And we see somebody who was making efforts to make it work. That person's appointment was not renewed. It could be other reasons. But clearly this gives you an indication that probably his appointment as minister was not even renewed because of the problem in quotes that he was creating within cabinet or within government circles. That, listen, this fight can only be won if you come on the side of the people, but you are on the other side. And it's because, as a political scientist said, politics is based on self-interest. But this self-interest, much as you will gain something extra by going to politics, it is not at the expense of the ordinary person. So as for the Galamsey fight, we all know it, that it is just being fought as a public relations thing. The committee, there have been committees and institutions and bodies set up by the government, and it is seen as being serious about attacking a particular problem. But at the end of the day, because when the problem is solved, it will benefit the larger society, but not the few people in government who are bent on fleecing the country. They put impediments in the way of such committees, and this is one of the such committees. Talk about Office of Special Prosecutor. The office needs money to be able to perform its work. The office has been stifled of money. You talk about SHRASH. SHRASH has also been muzzled because they don't get the resources they need. Talk about the enthusiasm and energy that the new IGP brought to the Ghana Police Service. That enthusiasm and that energy and that focus is dying out now. Talk about the court. Some decisions that have been made by the court are being questioned. So we don't seem to know where to turn to now. And the government needs to really sit up, and the talk has become too much.
All right.
And that it's not a good indication at all that the government is fighting the Galamsey money. Not only Galamsey, but others. But Galamsey is connected to the other problems. It's connected to corruption. It's connected to state capture. It's connected to efforts to undermine the integrity of certain institutions which are critical pillars for democracy in the country.
Just hold for me on that point, because there are other crucial areas I want us to tackle. But someone who has also taken a keen interest in this latest report and the development so far has been Kobina Arthur Kennedy, Dr. Arthur Kennedy. And he is the former flag bearer aspirant of the party, parliamentary aspirant as well within the MPP. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Arthur Kennedy, all the way from the United States.
You and good morning to all your panelists. Good morning to Ghanaians listening and watching.
I'm going to start on a rather interesting note because I've followed some conversations in the past and concerning your party, the NPP. Are you still a member? Just the start of the conversation, because sometimes people say that, hey, he's not even a member of our party. Don't refer to him as a bigwig or an MPP member. He is not. Just clarify for us this morning. Are you still a member of the NPP before we get to the substantive issue?
Member of the NPP, but for this conversation, I think what is required is to be a Ghanaian.
Okay, so you started by saying you are a member, but for this conversation, what is required to be a Ghanaian? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Now, let's get into the main meat of the matter. You've seen, undoubtedly, Professor Frimpong Boateng's report. What do you make of it? Even before we get into the surrounding issues, what do you make of that report?
I think it's a damning, substantive, fact-filled report, and the idea that it sat on the president's desk for 2 years is unimaginable and unfathomable.
Some have said that it was presented to the chief of staff and that the president may not have seen it. Some have even gone as far as suggesting that if Professor Frimpong Boateng wanted this to gather the sort of steam he is putting out now, then he should have addressed it at the cabinet level. How do you respond to such concerns or comments?
Well, I mean, those saying that are not serious. To begin with, all around the world, everybody knows that when you hand a report to the chief of staff, it is as good as handing it to the president, unless the president wants to say he has no confidence in his chief of staff. As for presenting it at the cabinet level, at that time he had left the cabinet, so he couldn't have presented it to the cabinet. Furthermore, the report itself contains clear, unambiguous instances of him bringing up to the president the problems that the Interministerial Committee task force was having. Particularly, for example, with regard to the senior minister, with regard to Sir John, with regard to a lot of others, and the president promising to address those. He didn't. So the idea that if he wanted to be serious, he would have presented it at the cabinet level is really a non-starter, and no serious person will say that. I think that not only that, I actually am happy that we're doing this on JoyNews, because you and your reporter Erastus Asaridonko did some very brave reporting in which you highlighted a lot of the problems in Galamsey. There were instances where two groups of military people almost came to blows, with one group with the Interministerial Committee, another group protecting the Galamseyers. And this was aired and everybody saw it. So the idea that this report has been on the blind side of the president is really a joke and an insult both to the president's intelligence and integrity as well as to Ghanaians.
Both to the president's intelligence and integrity. Why do you say that?
I mean, it is obvious that those making the argument are not serving him well. You know, when you say that a president's chief of staff has had a report for 2 years, but he didn't know about it, I mean, that's really not on. And secondly, I'm also saying that the reporting by Joy FM and other news outlets should have come to the attention of the president. So the idea that he didn't know about it is really something that serious people should not claim.
Earlier today, I actually interacted with Kojo Poku, who interestingly is a flag bearer aspirant for the MPP come November. You've been in that position before, and he said that he didn't take this as allegations. In fact, for him, they were fact. Now, do you take everything in this report by Professor Frimpong Boateng as the gospel truth?
Well, I wouldn't go as far as to say that, but I would say that he has put on the table significant issues that require interrogation. I think some of them obviously are facts. Others we haven't verified. But, for example, when he says that I had a problem with the senior minister and I reported him to the president, and the president said I would deal with it. I had a problem with Gabi and I reported to the president and the president said he would deal with it. I think those can be taken as facts. I think the professor has put on the table substantive, reasonable, very verifiable facts on the table. And at this point, it is beyond speculation. And actually, it also begs the question about when the president himself pledged to put his presidency at stake to fight Galamsey, what he has done. And I can tell you that a week after the president made that claim, I was talking to a friend of mine who is a seasoned journalist. I don't have permission to mention his name. He told me candidly that in his view, the president's claim that he was going to fight Galamsey was an empty boast. When I asked why, he said, quote, "There are too many big people in his family and in his government and in his party involved, and he does not have the balls to deal with them." Actually, we placed the bet, I on behalf of the president, that he will win. And now, when I go back to Ghana, I owe him the bet because he won it.
So this is quite an interesting picture you paint. I would like to ask you then, are you disappointed in the president based on what he said, that he would put his very presidency on the line to combat Galamsey, tackle it and bring it to its knees, versus what you're seeing now on which you've lost a bet? Are you disappointed in the president?
That's an understatement, and you should be disappointed too. I mean, I do not see any evidence anywhere that anything has been achieved in the Galamsey fight. Not only that, the repeated reports of powerful people in the government and in the party being involved in Galamsey, while we see our water bodies being dirtied and our environment being degraded, there is nothing positive about it. And I am heartbroken because I was so excited when I heard the president's promise.
Let's look at that recent statement you put out. You titled it "The Echoes of Galamsey in Ghana," and you start by saying, I'll let you expatiate on it, but you say Galamsey has come to symbolize, unfortunately, the capture of our governance by criminal elements bent on channeling public resources into private hands to our collective detriment. You go on and on. But I'd like to find out from you. You speak about this interesting bit that, ironically, even while the investigation ordered by the president was ongoing, there was a statement from the government seeking to undermine Professor Frimpong Boateng and his report. Looking at how this is played out from the different parties, from the standpoint of Gabi Asare-Otrodako, the president's cousin, to ministers and others whose names have been mentioned, the likes of Lord Kome, a bigwig in the MPP, the likes of Information Minister Kojo Nkrumah, who has had cause to respond. I'm only bringing up these names because these are people who have come to the fore, responded, and all of that. What do you make of that game being played, and whether that shows any commitment from the presidency, and how you feel, for example, Mr. President should be addressing the issue from the standpoint of what he tells his subordinates, his ministers and others who have been pointed at?
Well, I don't even know where to start. I think that we are witnessing a full-blown demonstration of why our country and our governance has become a charade. There are people who believe that a lot of third world countries like Ghana and Nigeria and others, that we keep bemoaning and wondering why things don't work, are working the way those who control it want it to work. I believe that the purpose of our governance these days has been the transfer of public resources into private hands and control. And we are witnessing that full-blown. Not even one of those against whom allegations have been made in Galamsey have been interdicted. The excavators have disappeared and reappeared, the allegations of this. But at the end of the day, all those speculations don't matter. We can look on the ground and see how the rivers are being polluted. And I want to commend Joy FM for their very brave reporting. I think Erastus Basaldonko, I even feared for his life, standing between two groups of military men. And right now, questions we ought to ask is, aside from the Galamsey industry capturing the political space, the question is whether they have also captured the military and security space, and that we can no longer trust our security forces to enforce Ghana's laws. And what is happening right in front of our eyes is very sad, that we're destroying our environment so recklessly and nobody seems to be willing or able to do anything about it.
Now, there's this point, lest I forget. You speak about the attempts at impugning, the author of the piece in this recent piece that you put out. But some have also said, in firing back at Professor Frimpong Boateng, some have said that he himself was mired in a way in illegal mining while he was minister. He has parried that, but does it matter to you that the author himself, if he is not whistle clean, would it matter to you, Doc?
A little bit, but I am a serious person. And I believe, the analogy I used is the equivalent of going to take an exam and you have questions, you have about 5 questions, and the 5th question is for 5 points. All the others are for 95 points. And then you are focused on, I've got to get this question which has 5 points right, otherwise I won't tackle the other questions. I think we need to know whether Professor Frimpong Boateng himself is corrupt or has been involved in Galamsey. But that issue, the answer to that, would only underline the extent of the problem we face. Regardless of whether he himself is involved or not, I think we are beyond that. He has put on the table significant, credible, disturbing allegations, most of which are verifiable, independent of whether he himself is involved or not. I mean, whether he is involved or not will not change the fact that the president promised to deal with all these senior people he didn't deal with. Whether he is involved or not will not change the fact of whether people at Flagstaff House are involved or not. It will not change the fact of whether Galamsey was done right up to the president's backyard and it affected his garden. It will not affect the fact that senior party people are doing Galamsey or not. And we can verify all those things independent of whether or not the professor himself has clean hands. And I think we ought to be going on to do that. It will not change the fact that members of parliament are using their positions to get concessions so they too can do Galamsey. And more to the point, it will not change the fact that our river bodies and our environments are being destroyed right in front of our eyes.
A crucial point you make in this, and right before we get to that tall list or long list, you write, predictably, a network of interested parties have begun not to challenge the substance of the report, but to impugn the integrity of the author. That report, together with a bold and chilling documentary by JoyNews and Erastus Asare-Donkor, and you mentioned Kevin Taylor's recent expose, should trouble the conscience of every Ghanaian patriot. And it has sat on the president's desk for 2 long years. We Ghanaians must ask ourselves some important questions, and you go into those questions. But I'd like to find out from you, this bit about what you say, impugning the author rather than challenging the substance of what he says. If you've listened to the likes of Gabi Otredako, in fact, Kojo Nkrumah found it a surprise that he was in there. Gabi Otredako has also had cause to respond to this. Why do you think they are attacking the author and not the substance of the matter?
Because maybe the substance is unassailable. That is my point. If Eko Ewusi, I think, says 80% of what the professor is saying is true, but he himself was involved. Then which 80%? Let's deal with that. If somebody in the position of Gabi, who I am sure is a good lawyer, has toiled most of his life to make his cousin the president, and the president has pledged his presidency to fight Galamsey, yes, Galamseyers must be defended, but must they be defended by Gabi? I mean, isn't that a conflict of interest?
But he's a lawyer. He's a lawyer. It is reminiscent, if you'll permit me, of the Freddie Blay issue, where his chamber or whatever was representing someone supposedly, I think Aisha Huang or something of the sort. And some said, wait, he may be a member of the MPP, he may be a former chairman, but he's a lawyer, he's a practitioner, and he's free to do this. What do you make of it?
Yeah, but he's not the only lawyer in Ghana. I'm just saying that there is a huge conflict of interest, and there are people who have said, I don't have evidence of that, that maybe the reason why Gabi was the lawyer was not really because of his law skills, but because of his connections. I'm just saying that it's unseemly for people involved in Galamsey to be defended by Gabi when the very government, led by the person whose private lawyer and counselor he is pledged to fighting Galamsey. It's just not appropriate. That shouldn't be happening. And I also talk about all these other people who say, oh, most of what the professor is saying is true, but he is involved. What is it that he's saying that is true? Let's deal with that, so that afterwards, if you have evidence that he is involved, you can add to it. But whether he is involved or not does not change the fact that this fight against Galamsey is an abysmal failure.
You say the fight against Galamsey is an abysmal failure. Let's get into some of the points you raised. And Professor Appiah-Jay, just hold for me. I'll be coming to you shortly. I want you to take stock of the points that Dr. Arthur Kennedy makes, so that when I walk through them with him, I can come to you on the same points for you to give me your take. So back to you, Dr. Arthur Kennedy. You're right, and I'm not going to read all 9 or so of them. I'll just pick and choose a few. You can expand on them. You start by saying the questions that Ghanaians ought to be asking themselves or ourselves. 1, when the president pledged to put his presidency on the line to fight Galamsey, did he mean it? And did he fight? 2, when the president got this report 2 years ago, what exactly did he do with it? 3, looking at all that has happened since the president took office, is this president fighting Galamsey or fronting for it? You put those in caps, fighting and fronting. Then 4, are our security forces enforcing our laws or protecting those breaking our laws and destroying our environment? 5, are members of parliament committed to protecting our resources from criminals or just seeking their concessions to line their pockets? 6, are our traditional rulers true custodians of our wealth and lands and environment who will protect it for posterity, or accomplices of Galamseyers who are betraying us like their ancestors did to slave traders and colonialists? And that's a very important point you make, because traditional rulers have also been called out, but we've heard from the likes of the Asantehene Otumfuo Osei II, and among others, talking about the fact that they have no real powers when it comes to this. We should look to the executive. So that's a crucial point. 7, is it moral for the cousin of the president, Gabi, to be defending Galamsey as while his cousin has pledged to put his presidency on the line to fight it? 8, why is it that whenever our governments come to crossroads between good and evil, moral ministers get sacked while corrupt ministers are retained? And final point, can small-scale mining be done legally without destroying our environment? What made you reflect on all of these, and what is your verdict after having penciled these 9 points? What is your verdict, Dr. Arthur Kennedy?
Well, I like you said, there are a lot of points there, but to my mind, there are 3 of them, or 4, that are very crucial. The first thing is whether the president has been fronting for Galamsey or fighting it. And I say this painfully, because my most exciting day was the day I saw him make that pledge that he was prepared to put his presidency on the line. I think that on the basis of the evidence we have, he has not been fighting Galamsey. As to whether he's been fronting for it, I don't have enough evidence to say that. But I am not persuaded that he has been fighting it. That's on the president. The second point is that I think that all this sudden interest in Professor Frimpong Boateng's report is really a PR exercise rather than an exercise in leadership and accountability. If they were going to do leadership and accountability, all the 2 years that the report has been sitting there, they would have dealt with it. The reason they didn't deal with it was that they didn't want to do anything about it. And right now, all what people are trying to do is to protect their legacies and their reputations rather than do something for Ghana. Then I go to the role of the chiefs. With all due respect to our chiefs, including respectfully Otumfuo, if the chiefs, regardless of whether they have power or not, decided that they were not going to let their forests and river bodies be polluted and poison poured into their waters, I am telling you, no executive authority will be able to stand in their way. And everybody knows that if the Asante said not 1 inch of a river in Ashanti will be polluted, and I will mobilize young men to go and defend the river bodies, regardless of authority they will be. And most of the chiefs in Ghana can do the same thing. Actually, a few of them, I'm told, are doing it. So respectfully, I just don't buy the idea that the chiefs have their hands tied behind their backs. If this was something they wanted to do, and it is something they should want to do, historically, morally, and ethically, if they wanted to do that, no authority would go over them to do it. And the last point about Parliament is that I think that these discussions we are having, it should be taking place in terms of parliamentary hearings so that we know what has been done, we know what hasn't been done, we know the state of our laws, we update it. If you go to Mali and Venezuela and a few other countries where they do small-scale mining without destroying the environment, you have to have a rigorous legal regime. You have to hold people accountable for breaking the law. You can't do it with a situation where you have an interministerial committee trying to stop the illegal mining, and then lands and mineral resource and others giving people permits to, in effect, undermine the very fight the government itself claims to be committed to. No, we are not serious.
Just hold for me, Doc, as we wind down on the conversation. I'd like to bring in Prof as well, and then we'll share our final thoughts on the way forward. Professor Appiah-Jay, listening to everything that has been dilated on by Dr. Arthur Kennedy and his 9-point on which he elaborates, in fact, he just elaborated a short while ago. What do you make of it, and what do you make of the 3 points he just shared with us? Hello, Prof.
Thank you. I think I've made this point before, and I will repeat it, that the criminals are becoming politically minded, and politicians are becoming criminally minded. And that is a very bad combination in the fight against the Galamsey menace we're talking about.
Just a quick point. Are you suggesting then that in a way we have criminals infiltrating our governance system? Do we have criminals in government?
What is Galamsey? Galamsey is an illegal act. And if you are committing an illegal act and the laws are clear in the Criminal and Other Offences Act, you are a criminal. So the fact that you have not been arrested and prosecuted doesn't mean that you are not. And we have a situation where the governance has been infiltrated by such criminal gangs and groups. And I've also made a point that Galamsey is an transnational organized crime, where it cuts across boundaries. There are networked groups that operate in that domain, And at the end of the day, it's not just the criminal activity they are engaging in. They affect the very fabric of governance in the country. Governance has now been diluted and it's become a hybrid form of governance system that we have in the country. And there are state-embedded actors that are involved in this. If you are not ready to join the fray, you are cut out. An example is what Professor Frimpong Boateng is facing now. He's being fried for trying to do what is right. I mean, as has already been said by Doc, some of the facts are there. They are unimpeachable. And so you ask yourself, for example, what is the police doing? The police is supposed to fight these criminal activities. There was a clear case where Akunta mines were fingered, and you would have expected that the police would at least call this, the chairman of the Ashanti Regional MPP, for questioning and for him to provide evidence contrary to what has been alleged that he's been engaged in. Erastus's report is there. There are so many reports by the media coalition and so on, and nothing is being done about it. And at the end of the day, we have a situation where the issue about the role of the chiefly authorities are also questionable because they see some of these things going on in their communities on a daily basis. You also need to talk about the district assemblies, the municipal assemblies. They all know what is going on. So if you have a situation where government is unable to act, then it comes down to the influence such criminal minded people have put into the machinery of governments, and then the fact that they want to reap back what they have sown. And that is what state capture is about. It is no more the government that is running the show, but people who directly or indirectly have aided the government to come to power and is supporting the government in some other activities, and therefore they are running the show. Otherwise, there's no other explanation to postulate, to support the claim that what is going on is not being influenced by criminal activities. Because at the end of the day, when criminals are able to influence governments, they are able to prevent government from using its machinery to stop them from operating. And so if you're able to influence that and you're able to buy your way through, that is what gives you unfettered powers and unfettered authorities to do whatever you do with all the impunity that goes with it.
Just tell me, especially as you operate in the sphere of the law, heading into election 2024, what could this imply if literally criminal elements are infiltrating government? And even beyond 2024, what could that mean for our democracy, for the fight against state capture, as Dr. Arthur Kennedy makes mention of, among others? What do you think of that? Briefly on that, so we conclude.
Well, this is not the first time we are witnessing criminal involvement in politics, but it has been taken to a higher level under the NPP. The NDC did the same thing or did similar things. And if you go to places like Guinea-Bissau, which is called a narco state, police officers, ministers of state, even the president at the point in time were alleged to have been involved in narcotics deals and so on. So it's not something new. Some political scientists point to the way our financial campaigning structure in terms of finances that go into campaigning during elections are organized, because you need a huge amount of resources and people don't have it. Therefore, they propose, for example, that the state should sponsor political parties so that they will not be forced to rely on financiers, the godfathers, who at the end of the day who lurk behind the scenes and control the affairs, the destiny of the country. So going into 2024, the situation is not going to get any better. And one thing I've also realized about Ghanaian politics is that when one regime comes to power and does some bad things, the new party that replaces it or takes over power does not take serious efforts to deal with the problem, because they have identified a gold mine that they also want to dig into, and they dig deeper. So if you're not careful, and I'm not imputing any wrongdoing on any political party, but it may get worse whether MPP retains power or whether NDC comes to power. Because remember, Professor Frimpong Boateng's report also identified some NDC activists involved in the Galamsey exercise. So it's not on only one side. But so long as the NDC has come to realize that this is how deep an NPP could go, if they should come back to power, they may even dig deeper. And that is the worry.
As we wrap the conversation, I would like to go back to Gabi Asare-Otrodako and his own reactions. He speaks about the fact that Professor Frimpong Boateng deliberately twisted his mediation to cause public disaffection for him. But Prof comes back to say, Mr. Gabi Otrodako, it is laughable that you claim to have called me to seek information on your client. If you needed any information, you could have called the Minerals Commission. You know I did not operate mining information services. He goes on to add, you called to tell me that your client had a valid mining license and all necessary permits. I told you that Heritage Imperial Company Limited did not possess documents permitting it to undertake active mining. That notwithstanding, through your intervention, the Chinese who were arrested were released by the task force. The many soldiers who were providing security services to your client's company attacked the IMCIM task force team and damaged the vehicle carrying journalists who were covering the IMCIM operations. The unfortunate scenes were captured on camera and shown on JoyNews. You can check out the rest of the story on myjoyonline.com. But gentlemen, for both of you, and I'll start with Dr. Arthur Kennedy on this. What do we need? Further investigations. The Galamsey issue is broad, but on this specific matter tied to Professor Frimpong Boateng, what do we need? Further investigations, and where do we go from here? I'll start with you, Dr. Kennedy.
I think that we need to have hearings by Parliament. I do not trust the CID to properly investigate this. I think that they are compromised and too beholden to the government. And the investigation should not be just to assign blame. It should be to look at how we can make small-scale mining legal, environmentally sound, and beneficial to our country. The second thing is that I am very concerned about the idea of state capture. I think that we are watching the unraveling of this Fourth Republic and our country. So I urge all Ghanaians not to sit on the sidelines. My fellow Ghanaians, we are the men we have been waiting for. If we don't do this, nobody else will do it, and they are destroying our country right in front of our eyes. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kobina Arthur Kennedy, joining us all the way from the United States. He's a former contender for the flag bearership slot of the MPP, as well as a parliamentary slot as well. We're grateful so much for your time, Dr. Kennedy. Let me take the final words of Professor Apiagyei on this matter. Same questions to you.
I endorse what Professor Kennedy has said, that a parliamentary probe, a probe from a parliamentary probe will help deal with this canker that we are confronted with. And I also want to call for looking at the roots of the problem. And for me, the root of the problem lies in campaign financing. if you're able to plug the holes as to who finances a political party, if political parties are made to account for after every election, how much they've spent, and at the end of every year or so, according to the rules, the laws that deal with political parties, I think we'll be able to plug some of the loopholes whereby, and then we'll also look at the possibility of states funding political party campaign activities. We should be as stringent as we are. For example, the situation we have in the U.S., where it can lead to even criminal prosecutions for campaign financing issues. So that will help deal with the matter one way or the other. And I think it's also important that people should look at issues, not just personalities and not just political parties, because sometimes when you make these commentaries and you want to bring out the problems, the reaction seems to be that so long as my party in power, I don't care. And so the fact that our democracy needs to move to a higher level is highly recommended, so that we look at issues, not just personalities or parties, and to be able to properly inform as to who we vote for. That will make a difference, in my opinion.
Thank you so much, Professor Appiah-Gyei, for having joined the conversation. Professor Appiah-Gyei Etua, of course, a lecturer at the Faculty of Law of the University of Ghana. Ghana4, we've come to the end of this conversation on Professor Frimpong Boateng's take, his report on the state of Galamsey in our country. It dates back to 2 years ago. And interestingly, when you take a look at the report, a lot of what he says, the dynamics are still at play, if not worse at play. And of course, he mentions names. Only time will tell how the situation pans out.